Have you ever wondered why the Bible, a book revered by millions for its moral teachings, appears to allow polygamy, especially in the Old Testament? This question may have crossed your mind, and you're not alone. The topic is complex and multifaceted, requiring a careful understanding of the historical, cultural, and theological context in which these texts were written. The Bible, a collection of texts spanning various literary genres, from historical narratives and laws to poetry, prophecies, and moral teachings, presents a rich tapestry of human experience. But here's a key point to remember. There's a difference between what the Bible describes and what it prescribes. Just because a practice is mentioned doesn't mean it's endorsed. So, are you ready for a deep dive? Let's delve into the world of the Old Testament to unearth the reasons behind this practice. Don't worry, we're in this exploration together. So, let's get started. Picture this. You're in the Near East, thousands of years ago, in a society where the number of wives and children determines your wealth and social status. The world is a far cry from what we know today. The culture is deeply patriarchal, and the practice of polygamy is not just accepted, but expected. The more wives you have, the more children you can father. This ensures your lineage continues, especially in a time when infant mortality rates were high and survival of the family line was paramount. Now, imagine you're an Israelite, part of the culture of the Old Testament. Here too, polygamy was prevalent. Figures like Abraham, Jacob, David, and Solomon, who we often look up to, were all polygamous. But why was this practice so common? It was seen as a necessity to increase offspring and ensure the survival of the family. Remember, this was a time when family labor was crucial for subsistence. But here's the catch. Just because something was common practice doesn't mean it was approved of or even endorsed by the divine. In fact, the Bible is quite transparent about the negative consequences of polygamy, illustrating the family conflicts, jealousy, and divisions it often led to. Now that we've set the stage, we need to clarify a crucial point. Just because the Bible describes something, does that mean it approves of it? It's a question that's far from trivial. In fact, it's one of the key aspects to understanding the Bible's approach to complex issues like polygamy. To put it simply, the Bible is a historical document as much as it is a spiritual guide. It records stories of individuals, societies, their triumphs, their failures, their virtues, and, yes, their sins. Look at figures like Abraham, Jacob, David, and Solomon. They're central to the narrative of the Old Testament, and they all practice polygamy. But does that mean God approved of their actions? Not necessarily. The Bible doesn't shy away from showing us the negative consequences of polygamy. It pulls back the curtain on the family conflicts, the jealousy, and the divisions that often arose within these polygamous households. Polygamy wasn't presented as an ideal, but rather as a reality of the time. The Bible's descriptions are not always prescriptions. It provides us an honest, unfiltered view of historical events and cultural practices. But when we look closely, we can see God's wisdom unfolding, guiding us to discern what aligns with His divine will and what doesn't. So, while the Bible may describe polygamy, it doesn't necessarily prescribe it. This distinction is crucial as we navigate the complex, multifaceted narratives of the Scripture. When it comes to the Bible's teachings on marriage, the picture starts to become clearer. The Bible's explicit teachings emphasize monogamy. It all starts at the beginning of creation, where the standard was set as a monogamous union between a man and a woman. Genesis 2, verse 24, paints this picture. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. This standard is reaffirmed by Jesus himself in his teachings, as he quotes Genesis and emphasizes the inseparable bond between a man and a woman in Matthew 19, verses 4 to 6. Moving forward in time, early church leaders are instructed to be husbands of one wife in 1 Timothy 3, verse 2. This instruction indicates the expectation of monogamy within the faith community. Clearly, the Bible's teachings point towards monogamy. But why then was polygamy tolerated? The key to understanding this apparent contradiction lies in God's tolerance and the divine ideal. You see, God often works within the cultural and historical context of His people, gently guiding them towards a deeper comprehension of His will. During the time of the Old Testament, polygamy was a cultural practice, a norm, rather than an exception. Yet it's crucial to realize that God's allowance of this practice was more of a tolerance, not an endorsement. This tolerance was a divine patience, a waiting for the right moment to usher in a fuller revelation of His will. It's like a patient teacher, allowing his students to make mistakes, yet always nudging them towards the right answer. And what's the right answer here? It's monogamy. Polygamy was practiced, yes, but it was never God's ideal for marriage. So, the divine ideal points to a monogamous marriage, but what does this mean for our understanding of polygamy in the Bible? As we wrap up our exploration, let's revisit the main points. We've delved into the historical and cultural context of the Old Testament, where polygamy was common, not as a divine endorsement, but as a reflection of the societal norms. We distinguished between the Bible's description of practices and its prescriptions, highlighting that the presence of polygamy does not equate to its approval. The Bible's candid narratives often expose the negative repercussions of polygamy, such as family conflicts and divisions. We also examined the Bible's teachings on marriage, which emphasize monogamy, fidelity, and love, mirroring the relationship between Christ and the Church. The allowance of polygamy in the Old Testament underscores God's tolerance of cultural practices as he guides his people towards a fuller understanding of his will rather than his endorsement of polygamy. So, when interpreting complex issues like polygamy in the Bible, always remember to consider the full context of scriptures and the divine redemption that points to a higher standard of human relationships.